today, Rinpoche gave a very clear explanation about why compassion is the root of the Mahayana and why bodhicitta is the entrance into the Mahayana.
Oh yeah. What de Jundi Manga do you going to send you to the Dajanabaji, you going to send you to you know, Jundi Manga do you going to send you to the Marba? Jundi Manga do you going to send you to the law? And the Jelang Abajeba down, the Gentu Jawa, Muni J. The Jelang Abajeba the law. Then Niji Chamber Tebachimbo launches Tawa. Mashi didn't do. Young Sabas on the Nijig Joe. Hassan the Sajin Nijig Debus Mara, what the lady Mara. Then that is yelling about Jeba the La Jadon to Julujan, the Shaju in Julujan, Jambin de Sajin was one, Sajison Mariba, or the college you know.
So once again, we're looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and specifically the section on training the mind in the stage of the path for persons of great capacity. And when we look at the development of the mind that aspires to enlightenment, there are two different causal lineages for achieving that: the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, and equalizing and exchanging self with others practice. So these are the two causal lineages, and today we're going to be talking about the lineage passed down from Lord Atisha, called the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. I believe it's called the training based on the 7 cause and effect personal instructions in the lineage descended from the elder, the great elder, and here that's referring to Lord Atisha. Then here we have 2 major categories under that section. First category is developing certainty about the order of the stages, and then the second category is how the 6 personal, how the 6 other personal instructions are either causes for compassion or results of compassion. So this is the first section, and then the that's the second section. So looking at the first section, where we have developing certainty about the order of the stages, we learn that the compassion is truly the root of the Mahayana path and so forth, and then showing its importance throughout. And then the second category, which gets into the other personal instructions, either being causes or results of great compassion, we show how the first 4 points in the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment are causes for great compassion. So recognizing all sentient beings are our mother, remembering their kindness, wishing to repay their kindness, and love through the force of attraction. These are all steps that are causes for great compassion. And then after great compassion, we find the wholehearted resolve, or I translate it as the extraordinary attitude, and then the last category of the mind that aspires to enlightenment. So these 2 are results of great compassion. So this second category shows how these points are either causes of great compassion or results of great compassion. So these are the 2 categories that we go through, and that's where Rinpoche stops. So I'll let everybody know where we are in the text once Rinpoche begins an actual direction from paragraph.
Ta jende tanya julu zhongwa tala nye re duwa lo de ji jidruba dang tangpa je lo de je bang sa ji nye ro ta lo de jidruba tala tangpa tala nye re duwa san nyoba druba dang ta je yungu ke naba chen druba marba ta je ke yungu ke naba chen druba sa ji nye re duwa ta je yungu ke naba chen druba as
Okay, so then looking further into the outline, when we finish after that section where we find that the other 6 personal instructions are either causes for great compassion or results of great compassion, then we get into this next section, which is called the gradual training. And in the section on the gradual training, there are 3 categories. First, training the mind to be intent on others' welfare. Second, training the mind to be intent on enlightenment. And third, identifying the spirit of enlightenment, the fruit of the training. So there are 2 categories under the first category, training the mind to be intent on others' welfare. First, establishing the basis for this attitude, and second, the developing of the attitude of being intent on others' welfare. And then looking at the first category within that subsection, we have the major heading, establishing the basis for developing this attitude, and then 2 categories, achieving impartiality toward living beings, or equanimity, and then second category, having affection for all beings. So this is page 36, where we've come up to in terms of the outline in the English. So we're going to begin today on page 44. We previously went over this section on the cultivation of compassion. Rinpoche said it's very important, so he wants everyone to understand it well, so we're going to go over it again. The Anjastun Langonga Mepachi Rimcheng, the NGK, the Loglu, Anjer, the Guma Yapumasam. Okay.
Tombo Niji Cheba said, Niji Cheba Nol da Mibala Subgundu go. Niji Cheba dance, Tamboje. That Niba Niji the Sajila to Niji Buddhist, to what you Marba. What the Piji in Bayu.
Lesser.
Sajila Cheba to what you Badala, Dune the Mudwe. What the Kalegal and Rajakorajo.
The Sumba Semche Dang. The
Sumba Sajil Chebra to Tobachobas.
Semche Chapa.
Sajil Tobachobas.
Okay. Dopar, Ale. Techen Semche Dopa.
Sajil Toba Mamboyer.
Okay. Okay, so in this section, the cultivation of compassion, Jayana Seva states there are 3 categories. There are 3 major headings. The first category is the topics for the cultivation. So topics for cultivation, or something like this. Second category is the doubts about the differences between compassion and bodhicitta. And then third is doubts specifically that arise about great Mahayana mind generation, or great vehicle mind generation, which is, just as a translator's note, bodhicitta. But there are mind generations in the other vehicles. So when you say Mahayana mind generation, you're referring to bodhicitta. So these are the 3 categories that we'll find.
Oh, that and the Embarker, send you what Rubasana, Danye Bamasum with the Senyabu is Marba. Danye Bamasum with the Senyabu, the what the Tibetan Buddhism is. Tibetan Buddhism. They told Shambi Chutan, Hijik Samuel and the Shanju sent the Buddhism. Danu Saji Shambi Chulan, Hijik Samuel Junji Mebale. Shansan Zubin Debu choose. someone will let you know the understood
So, with the basis of equanimity, or a feeling of impartiality towards all, which serves like a ground, and it's then watered. We have, and then the compassion is compared to a seed, and then love is compared to water. Then the long yanju suranang,
Tanyu Sajis,
the long kona.
Tanyu Sajis Shambi Julians, Tanyu Sajid the Shambu Chudan, he is having done Shanju saying the Vichung.
So with the ground of equanimity or impartiality and the seed of great compassion watered by love, the great mind that aspires to enlightenment arises. So we find a point made in the Guhya Samaja Tantra where it states this. So we see how important these are.
That Daniel Bamasum will say now, but what they and Senor Druba said what they do, Senor Druba.
So
that you can never get to Druba said, you can never get to Druba said, Junior Manga doing on the Maché, Jesus on day, you can be doing, but you can be Joe. You can never get to Druba said, Maché, Jesus on the day, you can be Judas, they are going in. And then you can be Chenrezig, Marba, you can be Joe.
So this impartiality that we're trying to achieve, when we look at this equanimity, it's in terms of equanimity towards friends, enemies, and neutrals. So this serves like again as a basis, and then when we get into the section on the having affection for all beings, that's when we get into the other causes of the 7-point cause and effect. And then the next category of the development of an attitude of being intent on others' welfare is where we find the beginning of the cultivation of love, cultivation of compassion, and cultivation of the wholehearted resolve. So up to that point, the sections that we were dealing with were, let me look at the major heading. So that establishing the basis for developing this attitude section all leads up to the cultivation of this love, or the it's actually called loves through the force of affection or through the force of attraction. So all of these steps in the establishing the basis for developing this attitude lead up to that love through the force of attraction. So one is developing this impartiality towards friends, enemies, and neutrals, and then achieving affection for them by recognizing they are mothers, remembering their kindness and wishing to repay their kindness. And then, as a result of that, we move on to the next section, the development of the attitude of being intent on others' welfare. And that's when we begin with great love through the force of attraction, great compassion, and then the wholehearted resolve. Okay, that's... So now Rinpoche said we're going to go to page 44 and begin the section on the cultivation of compassion. So this first section where we have the topics for the cultivation of compassion, and looking at the Tibetan, it really is the word Ninji Chepa, which is a word for meditation or familiarization. So it's really becoming familiar with the topics that become familiar with compassion. So that Jayan Sheva states there's 9 categories under that section, beginning with the object of observation of great compassion.
So this Tenaji, and Drani, Bamasu Samalo, Kasogre, Dungaji Dunga, Yu Dunga, Chaban Duji Dunga, the Tena, Yabato, Niji Jagu.
So what is compassion? We cultivate compassion, or when, for instance, a small child is crying, and we want to remove whatever pain that child is experiencing. At that point, we're cultivating compassion for that child because we wish to remove his or her suffering because we see that he or she is crying. So this is generation of compassion. Here the object of observation is a child that is crying for some reason. And we look at what this compassion we're speaking of is. It's having that attitude of wishing to remove all sufferings from three types of beings: our friends, enemies, and neutrals. So the object of observation for this type of great compassion is all sentient beings who are experiencing the three types of suffering: the suffering, the suffering of change, and the pervasive compounded suffering. So that's the first category among the 9. The object of observation of great compassion is sentient beings experiencing among the 3 types of suffering. Diksung Rinpoche.
다 니지 집이 전이 가르스나 매바 생전 다지를 미네 나바 동에다 전도지 지 나바지 저와데 니지 집이 전이스 니지 집을 에나 송요와르스 네 생전 살아 매비 니지 전부 출러 매비 니지 전부 미면로 매비 니지 전부 송자우레스 어디 오만주 병고들이요 오만주 병고들이요.
So when we look at the subject compassion itself, or great compassion, it is defined as a consciousness which is the entrance to the great vehicle arisen in association. That's the wrong. Hold on one second. Just give me 1 minute. So there, I'll just go through the other parts first. So when we divide great compassion into categories, there are 4. Here we go. I found it. All right. So when we divide compassion into categories, there are 3 categories. Great compassion that observes sentient beings, compassion that observes phenomena, and compassion that observes the observationless or observationless compassion. Literally non-object, if you will, that observes non-object. So these are the 3 categories of great compassion, and great compassion is defined as either a wisdom or meditative stabilization in all things of mind and mental factors associated with them, relying on a concentration that wishes sentient beings be free from suffering. So this is the definition of great compassion. Diksung.
어제다 희지다 희지 쳐버들 고요가를 쓰고 말বে.
The ewa som lasong yene dunda ni lama.
이와 들어다 세계적으로면 희지 서근데 마다바도 비셔로다 대면도 비셔로지 조마지비 세계 다지르면 희지들 세계적으로면 희지 셴보스 마다바도 비셔로지 조셰비 네 희지 셴보들 출러면 희지 셴보 인송요래. 된 돈이도 비셔로지 조셈비 조셰비 희지 셴보데 매매라면 희지 셴보 매매 제이드셰션에서 어디 바데 what
So the 3 categories and these points can be found in the beginning of the Madhyamika Avatara. Rinpoche didn't quote it, but he just said that you can find it in the beginning of the Chandrakirti's entrance to the middle way. So what do these 3 mean? Great compassion that observes sentient beings is a great compassion that does not have the wisdom realizing emptiness, nor is it coupled with the wisdom realizing impermanence. It merely has as its object of observation sentient beings but without the wisdom realizing there, if you will, emptiness or impermanence. The second category, great compassion that observes phenomena, is a great compassion that also has the wisdom realizing impermanence. So the wisdom realizing impermanence, just as in parentheses, of the sentient beings that one is having compassion for. So that compassion that has the wisdom realizing impermanence with it is great compassion that observes phenomena. Great compassion that is observationless or is of no object is a great compassion that also has the wisdom realizing emptiness with it. So these are what those three categories refer to when we say there are three categories of great compassion. Diksung Rinpoche. Umanjupa the gola yurbe? Okay. So Rinpoche said that we're not going to be able to find it. It sounds like a challenge. We're not going to be able to find that right away today in the beginning section, but in the future we'll slowly go through the Madhyamika Avatara so that we can understand it. So in the future we'll get this quote. Rinpoche began to quote a few words of it and then said we'll just get it later. The Madhyamika Avatara, I apologize, was written by Chandrakirti. And Chandrakirti is one of the Nalanda Pandits that we see over here on in the picture. The Kagi. Tamo Nipa Sumba Nipa. Tama. So the last picture is Chandrakirti. No, he said maybe not. It is. The last is Chandrakirti. Chandrakirti is last. Da Drapa. And so you'll find this point made in the Madhyamika Avatara.
Hiji Chibatala Gujakan Wogo, Hiji Chibat Katu de Le, and Guamara Gu, and Jaji Saji Guja more. That Gu non Tombut de Dua, Tombut Hiji Gumbala, Hiji Mebane, Seja Dungas was a Jeriba, Dunga, Seja Nos, Hiji Mebat de Jagures.
So the first category is the object of observation of great compassion. So it says, so still on page 44, the cultivation of compassion. In order to understand the cultivation of compassion, you must know the following topics. So Jayan Sheba states there's 9 different points that are made here. The first point is the object of observation of great compassion. The object of compassion is living beings who experience misery through any of the 3 kinds of suffering. So this is the first category.
Dungaji dan yu dunga chaba luji dunga yobe sinje la mine tada da tena nyaba nije yimbare poku chuchung ngode kan dele mine dunga da tena nyaba de nije ro example tandabu yinsare.
So here it says the object of compassion is living beings who experience misery through any of the 3 kinds of suffering. So the 3 kinds of suffering, again, refer to the suffering, the suffering of change, and the pervasive compounded suffering. So the object of observation here of great compassion is any sentient being, so all sentient beings, who are experiencing any among the 3 types of suffering. It goes back to that example again that is very similar. when one observes a small child crying, one wishes to remove the suffering of that child. Here, one is observing all sentient beings suffering in 3 different ways and wishes to remove their sufferings that they're experiencing in those 3 different ways: suffering, the suffering of change, and the pervasive compounded suffering. So here the object of observation is all sentient beings experiencing those types of suffering, whereas in the other example of the small child, which we can relate to, is the object of observation is just that child who's experiencing some kind of suffering and crying, and we wish to remove it. So it's just a broader object of observation in the case of all sentient beings, but it can be compared to, for clarity, to the example of the small child.
원데서 그들 야부 산에 야부다네 산에 야부다나 쿨롤 산 땅보다 나서 생각을 바샤자는 그래서 바차 생 소수 생을 바차자는 그래서 바차도 자수나 네 바차도 어데 네 최심을 되네 어데 최도로 어데 산다는 바차 뭐 genre 세면래 어데 산는 코는 어데 야부용 그래서 천들레 산무부터는 바샤자바이나 세셔마를 야부용을 디셔마셔마는 야안루죠.
So if in this lifetime we think about these things and we go over these points that are being made again and again, we're leaving imprints within our continuum. So when we do in large amounts of studying and we engage in this familiarization, these imprints then in our future lives will lead to fruition of an understanding of these things, which will increase more and more as we leave more and more of these types of imprints to the point where we actually realize it at some future point in this life or in future lives. So this is the point of engaging in these studies and engaging in these familiarizations. It's so that we can eventually realize them in a complete way in the future.
다 senje kashi ni chebu yoare kashi ring yoare kashi o ni chuchu yoare o to ngalo sangami bacha gong ge marbe.
So you can see some sentient beings have a great amount of compassion. Some sentient beings have a medium amount of compassion. Some sentient beings have a very small amount of compassion. This is from previous familiarization with that subject.
So
if we think about this topic, it will leave imprints within our continuum.
다니엘 바마솔라 미네 나바 가르셔서는 이바 나바네 동아다다 테나 냐바다스 나바들로데 네 다니엘 바마솔부터다 동아다 테나 냐바 유 동아다 테나 냐바 차반도 유지 동아다 테나 냐바 듬바니제스 듬바도 빙고분 더드냐오스 냐바다스 저와 주지 냐베 네 dedication heje samarba halan heje ane jawa shawo nyaba lasan heje samarba lasan heje songden de doa.
So the second category is what are the subjects that one thinks about in relation to friends, enemies, and neutrals. These are the different types of sentient beings, as a note, friends, enemies, and neutrals. So what are the subjects that we think about them? So here it says the subjective aspects are thinking. So this is category number 2. How nice it would be if living beings were free from suffering. May they be free from suffering, and I will cause them to be free from suffering. So the subjects that one thinks about is, may my friends, enemies, and neutrals be separated from the suffering of suffering. May my friends, enemies, and neutrals be separated from the suffering of change. May my friends, enemies, and neutrals be separated from the pervasive compounded suffering. So this is the subjective aspects. This is what one is thinking about in relation to those friends, enemies, and neutrals. And here, different degrees or types of compassion are presented as well. So the first, how nice it would be if living beings were free from suffering, is a wishing compassion. The second, may they be free from suffering, is an actual dedication compassion. And then I will cause them to be free from suffering is a wholehearted resolve compassion. So there are three types of degrees or types of compassion that are presented here under the subjective aspects, which is category number 2 in Jayan Sheba's commentary. Dixon.
다 니지 공부 송바 니지 공부 코린렌도다
Lesso.
다니 바마 송부들 니지 간데스 공부 tomba 가를 공부래 니바 가를 공부 송바 간데 공부르스나 니지 공부 코린네 토만 자셰 danse 토만 소수 파마 단 빈자로서바 더술 미 공기이나 니지 찔하와 요레스 데네 바미시제 네 파마라서비 네 자실라면 해지 아버지 손나 때네 밤이 세제라면 고기나 아니 질하그레스 대 아버지 손 때네 달면 고나야 아니 해지 제무레스 자시다 다와 달랑 세냐바 주비세스 자시다 다와 달랑 해지 전부 제손나 아니 해지 수주 세제 타제로 공고레스 고모 대들 단유다 샴바다 Hijila yususu sheneri jendo gombas.
De Yomare.
Ah.
De Jipa.
Jiba ma, jiba chungombas mare.
The Kamala Shila. The NGK, the Kamala Shila, the Becha, the Sherab Becha, the Danyon, Dan Shamba, Dan Ninji, the Kanga, the Mipa, Jepa, the Mamba Yure, the NGK.
Jeba nalo tere, the Jebalja, chungobas
Jipa.
Te tere tanyu ta shamba ta, hijila yususu shene, regentu gomba desa wate ten shet sombare, chungobas and the Jebal.
Interesting. So there's an error in the. That's why I keep having the junior NGK. Chugudu.
What the time could
The Gonga
change it
the Kali Kali.
They are
The Kali Kali. Then the NGK, the Kamala Shila, the Sherab Becha, the Kalen, the Jrimbo, the Puik Yomare. Marebe.
Jiba chungabi du jesu nana lumen kama la shela so what jiba jiba. Jiba tan jiba jaji jiba jarungure. What the dama yenshi to what the sompi kore se la ndigore.
Okay, so just I could probably do better at this at break. The issue is that here it puts together. So number I'll show you in a minute. Number 3 is the steps of cultivating compassion. It says the steps of cultivating compassion are first to cultivate it towards friends, then towards those beings for whom you have neutral feelings, and next towards enemies. When you have equal compassion for your enemies and friends, cultivate it gradually toward all living beings in the 10 directions. And then it should say that there's these stages, these are the stages of gradually cultivating impartiality, love, and compassion. And then Kamala Shila set out this way while distinguishing. I need to really take time to separate it. But the point being is that number 4 starts the point about Kamala Shila is the wisdom the Abhidharma basket is point number 4. Point number 3, though, also has gradually cultivating impartiality and love and compassion contained in it. I just wish I could quickly find this. Susur Sherapi Jeji.
다 집어드는 중업인들이 지순도는 루면 까말라실라서 어떨 때래.
Okay.
대 이제 담아도 되다. 중업이 가서 그래. 저는 저게 안에 이제 너무 자실 공부를 바말로 공부는 잘 공부를 송버로 왔다. 대 공부대 네 중업인들이 지순도는 까말라실라서 송도스 어때 내가 저버리 지다래서 저는지 중업인들이 지순도네 그러면 까말라실래 이제 바일라스 아니 이제 공부 취대 담보 자실라 공부네 바말라 공 되네 달라고 되네 시제 타질라면 공부 취대 네 중업인들이 지순도네 그러면 까말라실래 송도스 이제 어때 내가 저버시다래서 됐네 신도 제대 수수 마셔와 담보 네 실라미네 Jambala, Jawatan Haya, Renaissance, Kala, Machawa Nalas, Susu Mashawa Chitomban, Sinja Taji, Dungan, Tena Chimarunya, Hinji Gumbaina, Hinji Juli Jiban Rabaji, you are there, and Danye Bamal Sandu, Town, Hinji Jio Mares, Danye Bamal Susu, Hinji the Abu Goyana, and then what the Shadon, Shilla maybe Hinji the Abu Yungures, what is on the Zare. 네 신도 체대 수수 마셔와 담번 내셔라 미네 장발라 저와다 나야 레레네사나 다녀봐마 레레네산 담바이나 간라야 마저와 나라스 레레네 인주 용아 하시바 따라서 담번 녀지되는 바마지 달라워 녀지게 녀지대 아버지 여바이나 저모단데 타 실라미네 세제 다절미네 진주 공부이네 야부 용거를 손대서
And then Kabar Kagadu Rinpoche. The Tama, the Jipa Tama.
실라미네 장나 소바당 수수와 간라 메장 나다 지시로서 어떻게 지시로서 두지도와 어때
Giro. Okay, Giro.
Okay.
Okay, so the way that I can kind of clarify it a little. So number 3 should end when you have equal compassion for your enemies and friends, cultivate it gradually toward all living beings in the 10 directions. Set out this way of gradually cultivating impartiality, love, and compassion in these stages. Period. Then it should say, Kamala Shila made a point to distinguish specific objects of meditation in the discourses on knowledge. So it should say it like that. It should say in the Kamala Shila, in the discourses on knowledge, set out to distinguish specific objects of meditation. So I don't know how it got mixed up. You can see it's kind of bunched up in the Tibetan, but there's clearly a stopping point where it says, cultivating impartiality, love, and compassion. These are the stages, and there's almost like a period. And then it says, in Kamala Shila, in his discourses on wisdom, set out to specific objects of meditation. So that's where it starts. So that's how it should kind of read. I could clean it up, obviously, more than that. But Kamala Shila, following the discourses on knowledge, made a point to distinguish specific objects of meditation. It is an extremely important point. If you train in these attitudes of impartiality, love, and compassion without distinguishing and taking up specific objects of meditation, but only using a general object from the outset, you will just seem to generate these attitudes. Then when you try to apply them to specific individuals, you will not be able to actually generate these attitudes towards anyone. But once you have a transformative experience towards an individual in your meditation practice, as explained previously, you may then gradually increase the number of individuals you visualize within your meditation. Finally, take all beings in general as your object of meditation. When you sustain this practice in meditation, you will generate these attitudes correctly, whether you are dealing with individuals or a group. So number 3 shows the stages of cultivating the compassion. First towards your friends, then towards your neutrals, then towards your enemies. And then number 4 says that it's Kamala Shila in the Abhidharma basket says that it's very important to have specific objects of meditation because of this. You need to make sure that you have a specific friends, enemies, and neutral. There's specificity there, and not just a general, a non-specific object of observation, because you won't actually realize anything without an actual object of observation that is tangible, that is actually real. So that's what the point of number 4 is. And it's saying that whether you're dealing with an individual or a group, if you do it in this way, in this order, then you will actually have the realization. If you don't, you won't have the realization. It's not possible for the realization to take place. So that's the clarification. That's why the last couple of weeks I've had to go back and read and stop and say that this is actually number 4. Actually, part of it is in number 3, and part of it is in number 4. It just needs to kind of be corrected a little bit. But I make mistakes in translation, every 10th line or so. So everyone does. And this book was beautifully translated, so I don't ever want to make it seem like I'm trying to critique someone else's work. We just need to, for the sake of this teaching, be able to, because Rinpoche is doing word by word, know exactly what it says in the Tibetan. So, Digso Rinpoche. So now we have the way to cultivate compassion.
마주베 세제는 코아 혼네 제당 수수 등에 제다 냐소 뇨아남 셈바데 등에 다다다 등에는 하시신도스 등에는 하시신도 어디바들 nga바렌도와 고비춘네 마주베 세제 다지사 세제 다지라고 많이라고 그러다 세제 다지라고 많이스 주생 가르스나 랑기 제와라 도마 요마레 세제 수수 세제 타마기 제와라 도마 매바 인다 마셰마뇨 바지에 요마레스 사마 수수 아마셰 뇨바레스 세제 다지라고 마레스 마주비 다니바마 세제 다나라 다나 코알레 혼네 네 코알레 코네 코아시 등에도 수수 등에 뇨고여로다 코아시 등에서나 던도송다 nganduson chokali dunga de la chi dunga susu dunga sana nyawa bala nyu dunga yuare eda la eda dunga yuare tundula tundu dunga mala me dunga hala lai dunga hamayi dunga watu susu dunga injirwa dunga tu san tangure son de zare susu dunga jetara nyaso nyowa nam semba de san tangures semba de dunga dana nga shesin dos dunga doate dunga to kangalondan dunga bhabi deba was chebendin ka to shesin bares samba jama ngoda samba de chebite telalo tu sewa taba debe lajara je tenla pobas samba jama ngoda ka to de nganju samba shede marbe dunga ju dunga chaban de ji dunga la ngaban ju nganju samba de shedan wata ka to she tabaroda
Guys, the Tama Garisabre? Tama, Gongel Mebe.
Dunga nang hashi sin dos. Dunga nang hashi sin dunga chaba dunga hashi sin bades. And 지분 가도 말বে.
Less. Okay.
삼바지
Disa.
온
You
것은
say
무슨
lutsa.
난중 삼바 말বে.
Less.
동안지 동안 주 동안 차반 유지 동안에 전화하냐베. 난중 삼바 어디가도
Okay.
시에 잡아res.
Okay.
야.
Tuchena. Okay. Tamche lagu. Okay. Okay, so the way to cultivate compassion is as follows. Consider how these living beings, your mothers, experience general and specific sufferings after falling into cyclic existence. I explained these sufferings earlier. So here, how do you cultivate compassion? How do you make compassion occur? So it says, consider how these living beings, your mothers. So first, in order to consider this, you have to establish that all sentient beings are your mothers. So there's it's understood within that, that you have to have that realization in order to start from there. So why are all sentient beings our mother? They are because, like ourselves, let me start there. Why are they our mother? We have beginningless rebirths. Our continuum has no beginning to it. And like our continuum being beginningless, all sentient beings' continuums are beginningless as well. So in our previous lives, at some point, in our beginningless lives, in their beginningless lives, they have been our mothers, but we've forgotten our previous lives, so we don't remember this. But they are our mothers. So this is the formula, if you will, that we use in order to cultivate this understanding that all sentient beings are our mothers. So it says, consider how these living beings, your mothers, experience general and specific sufferings after falling into cyclic existence. So general sufferings, so there are 6 realms of cyclic existence. The hell realm, the hungry ghost realm, the animal realm, the human realm, the demigod realm, and the gods realm. So these different realms, if you divide it into 2, the higher realms and lower realms, have common sufferings that they all experience. So this is what general sufferings refer to. A type of suffering that's experienced generally throughout cyclic existence. Specific sufferings are referring to the sufferings that specifically a hell being has, specifically a hungry ghost being has, specifically an animal has, specifically a human has, specifically a demigod has, specifically a god has. So sufferings that are specific to those individuals are specific sufferings, and general sufferings are sufferings that can be found throughout. So suffering can be divided also into 3, the suffering, the suffering of change, and the pervasive compounded suffering. So the thought is that we want our mothers, who were our mothers in previous lives, because we have beginningless rebirths, to be free from the suffering, the suffering of change, and the pervasive compounded suffering. So this is what we wish for. And it says, I explained this sufferings earlier, or previously, earlier, because in the section on training the mind in the stage of the past shared in common with beings of medium capacity, Lama Tsongkhapa went over in great detail suffering when the superior truth of suffering was presented. So the Buddha, at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, stated that this is the superior truth of suffering. So that statement was referring to the sufferings that we're referring to here that sentient beings are experiencing, that we're having compassion for. So this is the superior truth of suffering, is what Buddha told us suffering, told us was suffering, and then our compassion wishes to remove all forms of that from the lives of all sentient beings. So in the medium scope section, we have the points made where we establish what renunciation is. Then we have a measure of the determination to be free. We have the measure of what that renunciation is, how we qualify it, what the measure of it is. Then a section on dispelling misconceptions, and then a section on ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation. So we have these 4 sections in the medium scope, which go over very clearly within them all the different types of suffering that can be experienced and one would wish to be free from. So first, let me just make sure I got everything. Suffering. Previous moral sufferings earlier in the medium scope. Dig song. Not so common. The.
Oh yeah, what the never did yeah.
Okay. Nyingpa. Okay, so we'll take a short break. We'll be right back. We're right back. Okay. We'll get started. Okay.
That Rubat the Jabanding said what Katuro. Nabado, she is into the Nabaji. They are Jabanding said within the Jubalim with it. They are hard Jabanding. Do it.
5.
The Gana she is into Nabaji. They are Jabanding, so what the Katula. There's Madamudua. What the Jubalim with it. Tiang Hajibandi ki la jambe jeba inas raga khuzul angatema to khuzula de ya nyala pa de gombe chilho anjuros.
Let's Kuna? Okay. So number 6. So number 4 Rinpoche just went through, what did he go through? 4, 5, and 6 he just stated. So number 4, we have the Kamala Shila's points about being specific. And then number 5, we have the way to cultivate compassion, or the meditation. And then number 6 begins here. Moreover, if you have developed an awareness of your own general and specific suffering by training in the path of a person of medium capacity, you will assess your own situation and cultivate compassion toward others.
Truba Tiang Hajibandi ki la jambe jeba ina rangi nyala pa de gombe chilho anjuros. That Jibandi goes Samba Jong was a Naju Samba Maribe. Dungaji Dungan, Ju Dungan, Chabanji Dungan, Santan, the Data Tena Nabe, Naju Samba Jangurua. Ranti de Dungaji Dungan, Ju Dungan, Chabanji Dungan, San Naju Samba Duba Ina, and the Jela Mine, Dungaji Dungan, Ju Dungan, Chabanji Dungan, the Tena Nabe, Kijit Jilabu is. Hajunding la jambe jeba ina rangi nyala pa de gombe chila anjuros what the truba rendwa.
Less so. Okay, so number 6, when we break it down, says, moreover, if you have developed an awareness of your own general and specific sufferings by training the path of a person of medium capacity, you will assess your own situation and cultivate compassion towards others. So when you think of your own sufferings that you have to endure, you think of the suffering, the suffering of change, a pervasive compounded suffering. You think of all of the different types of suffering that you as an individual have to endure, and this will cause you to wish to get out, to have a desire to definitely emerge. This will cause renunciation to occur, your own renunciation. From that point of renunciation, where you're thinking of these various types of suffering, if you then turn your focus from yourself to others and recognize that they have these sufferings as well, and just like you want to be free from the suffering of suffering, change, and pervasive compounded suffering, they also wish to be as well. So when we turn our focus from our own suffering and our desire to emerge from it, and focus on others and wishing that their suffering, they have the suffering of suffering removed, they have the suffering of change removed, they have the pervasive compounded suffering removed, then this is great compassion. This becomes great compassion. So renunciation, the desire, the determination to be free, then can be transformed into great compassion because of the recognition of the types of suffering that you yourself have to endure, and the realization that everyone also does too, causes that shift in focus from oneself to others. And that's the pith point of number 6. So once you focus on your own suffering and want to emerge, that's renunciation. Once you turn that towards others and wish for them to emerge and be free from the 3 types of suffering, then this becomes great compassion.
다 듄바들 와데 니도 듄바들 니도 듄바 와데 란딘 등에도 공부 있는 가지고 삼바 준도래 옌르미네 고나 히지지 준도래 와데 레딩사데 듄바라 니 담부네 랑기 딘도 다다 산나 란딘도 등에지 등에 유 등에 차반 유 등에 산나 난주고 삼바지 준조라스 소소기 등에지 등에 유 등에 차반 유 등에 산다바이나 다다다 대나냐베 난주 삼바지 준도 조레스 젠데도 등에지 등에 유 등에 차반 유 등에 산다나 다다다 대나냐베 히지지 준조레스 히지지 준조로 왜자 라디도 네 셈바호도 마소나스 라디 동에서바 다 동에서 되나냐비 내가 주고 삼바지와 내도 마소나 내도 마소나 아니 제라미는 동에지 동에 주의 동에 차반 뒤지 동에 되나냐비 희지제도 야버지가 말했어 네 내도 마저스 어때 Dumba Dumba
The Drupa dan Dumba, the Ngay Sampa the Anjur.
Drupa Dumba the Drupa the Rendo. Ma Jibunding Kasu, Jibunding on the Jambaina, and the Nanu Samba Jelamin, Hijil Hawaii is. What the Drupa the Marva? That Dumba the what the Randi the Nanu Samba Sana, the Nasana. Nganju sambaji junduure jendi sandana ane hiji junduures odete marabanda dot.
We're having a situation again, I think, just give me a moment. Marjur pi sentient dinam korwa hune your mother's the ngapa
Ngaba.
Dunyal jitar zindo the ngapa Deyangar jipu
Then ha Jibundis or the Druba dead Madumudua.
Moreover, if you develop it on your own, Deyan jipu dingi lam jambe jipa
Jibayina, Jibundin Lujon Yabayina, and then Susan Yalaban and Hiji Jilha Yoris. Susu Dunga the Tray, Naju somebody Abayina, Jelamine, Dunga the Tanabi, Hiji the Lil Habjon Wizarota. Jilha and Juros.
Ragi Tini did a san, Yijangi Sampa JP Juro. Oh my word. Detsu, the NGK, the Zu Samazu. Just bear with me a moment here. I'm just trying. It's like a puzzle I'm putting together live. So just hang in there. Consider how these living beings, your mothers, consider this general and specific suffering. Shidan, susur, dunya, suffering of falling into cyclic existence. Ngar she zindo, ngar she ngama she zindo. I explained these sufferings earlier. Deyang Japur Din Gilang Jumbe Japa. Moreover, if you have developed Yamla Pade J Lapar Juro. It's all mixed up. So number 6, it has the medium. Moreover, if you've developed an awareness Jaran. Deang ya jepu dingi lang jambe jepa yina rangi nyan la pakde gombe. Then the jibu din the shedan sheda dunyel.
Chibindi samba jang ngo to samba de chibi samba jang ngo se nga yu samba jang de marbe. Dunga ji dunga ju dunga chaban ju ji dunga tena nya be nga yu samba de ba yina chibindi nge. Ani yen la mi ne dunga to dunga ji dunga ju dunga chaban ju ji dunga to tena nya be ji ji la wan ju ros le la bi jeng gures.
Le labo. Lapar. So it says so number 6 should say something like you will easily, if you train in the stages and if you have from your own side studied and trained in the stages shared in common with beings of medium capacity, then you will very easily realize this. And then, if you develop an awareness of your own general Jirangi, it just doesn't say that Jirangi Nyamla Pade. The next points so the point that's made in number 6 is that just about the medium scope and the individual engaging in the practices of the medium scope. And then the number 7 goes into, if you've developed, by following this method, you will easily generate compassion. Okay. So that's where it should be. You will easily, number 6 should end there. You will easily generate compassion. So if you train in the stage of the path for beings of medium capacity, you will easily generate compassion. By following, and then it should say you will assess your own situation and cultivate compassion towards others. By following this method, considering your own suffering creates the determination to be free. Thinking about others' suffering creates compassion. However, if you do not first consider your own suffering, you will not reach the key point of practice. So, sorry that's all chopped up, but there's 2.6 and 7 are made within there. The point of number 6 is that if you follow the medium scope stages, you'll easily be able to achieve this. And number 7 says, if thinking of your own suffering creates a determination to be free, and thinking about others creates compassion. So that's 6 and 7. It would take probably a half a day, for this to be exactly translated, this page. So we don't have that. But I tried to do the best I could to follow Jayan Sheba's outline and to make it make sense. Okay, Digsung Rinpoche.
다 듄바로 듄발 니도 듄바니 듄바 담드레도 랑기 딘도 다다 상나스 랑기 딘도 등에 등에 유 등에 차반두지 등에서 난간요 상바지 준도레스 지 준줄라스 젤민 등에 등에 유 등에 차반두지 등에 상다바이나 히 등에 다다 되나냐베 히지지 원조로 히지지 준조로스 왜저다 라딘도 세번 화도 마소나 내도 뭐죠 호사 라딘도 어떤가요 상바데 아버지면나 내 제대도 등에지 내도 야부 용마레스 내도 뭐죠 호스 어디바 dumba tombotre
Dumba Tombo. So number 7 has 2 parts. I'm just going to go from here just from here. Number 7 has 2 parts. The first part is considering your own suffering creates the determination to be free. Thinking about others' suffering creates compassion. However, if you do not first consider your own suffering, you will not reach the key point of enlightenment. That's the first part of number 7. The second part of number 7 we find in this next sentence. Digsun.
오지 다드네 뉘바니바 데렌도아 대단 처음바 장데 대단네 동행이 유동에 차반도 유지 동행라 민 동행도 되나냐비 희지집이 주더라고 처음바 장데스 제바 희지 메바 동행 자자 조 상사 송발라 루이트여바 나제 공바샤오스 희지집이 제바 공바이나 상사를 동행 자다 제송 요아레스 자다 조 what the Tena Yabe or the Hinju in the Jebu Woodes. Shansa Pasha the Rason de Ina, Shansa the Lanson Ragamudu, de Mamudute, Shansa the Ludu, the Jaza Jitan the Ramason, there's Mamudus.
Okay. So the second part of number 7, these are simple illustrations of how to meditate. Intelligent persons should meditate in detail on the 110 sufferings that are observed with compassion. These are explained in the Bodhisattva levels. So this is a text by Master Asanga. Rinpoche said that he has gotten the text now. He has it. But it's very large, and there's a lot of information in it, so it's going to take him a while to find this specific section with the 110 different types of suffering, but he will bring that to class in the future. He just has to find it, and he wasn't able to do so to this point, but he will. And the Rinpoche just keeps making the point, in case I missed it, that the types of suffering that we're thinking about continuously in the first point is the 3 types of suffering: the suffering of change, suffering of suffering, and the pervasive compounded suffering. Whereas in this next point, it's pointing to a much grander, larger way of looking at the sufferings by way of 110. 1, 2, 3.
What the Shansa Lu to Yabana Java Shansa to what they am Ludu with the Mamudu, and that the Jaza Jidrama.
So with the number of pages that I'll have to read through, I just haven't been able to get that yet.
Shansa Bacha Chur Raswan.
Rama-san.
What the Rason? That in the Jeba Terendo Jeba, then I to do Debaton, Toba Dan, Tatuba, Ju Sanji, Dungaton Le, Shanchu Samba Hinja Gombe, and then Dungan Samba Mon Son Sauce, what they jeba deredwa jeba te anye twedo na je tu so ngalo den donga papi de ba wo su donga ji donga ju donga chaban du ji donga tu so ngo so tu ne da ju bu ko tu sa ro nye twe ji donga ji de ba ngo ba tu ba les ta tu ba da ju bu ko tu ne ju da ju bu ko tu ne donga ji donga ju donga chaban du ji donga la nga ban ju yu ju sen ji donga thwa les 아니 샤주 세반 해주 공배 동해지 동해 주 동해 차반도 동해 세바도 모아송 요아레스 모아송 소스 what 제바들엔도와 타고 어디 샤주 세바데 네트도나 제레 엄부노로 엄부노에 샤주 세 예들레 아니 코셰로 자체와도 띵서바 예두 네트지 동해 상발에 네 샤주 상반 신주 공부 등의 상반에 자체와도 띵서버 요아레스 모아송소스 what 지바레.
Okay. So now we're at number 8, and again, I will figure out this 5, 6, 7 situation in the future. It has to do with a couple of things. Number 8, furthermore, it is said that the bodhisattva thoughts of suffering during their cultivation of compassion are more numerous than the Shravaka's thoughts, which perceive suffering with an attitude of disenchantment, the final and actual knowledge of truth of suffering for the Shravakas. So here, the point is that the bodhisattvas are of much sharper faculties than that of the Shravaka. So Shravaka is hearer, Pratyeka Buddha is a solitary realizer. So the bodhisattva is of much sharper capacity than either of the Hinayana practitioners. Therefore, their thoughts of suffering are actually stronger because of their compassion. So they have, because of their compassion, which perceives the suffering of all these sentient beings and has disenchantment for all of them, their disenchantment is actually stronger than that of the hearer who is focused solely on his or her own suffering. So this is the point that's made, and it's because of the sharper faculties that the bodhisattva has and is able to strengthen the disenchantment or the attitude of this desire to emerge from cyclic existence. This disenchantment becomes a disenchantment for not only them, but also all other sentient beings. So the amount of suffering thought about is much greater, and so it's more powerful, not only because of the masses, but because of the sharp faculties of the bodhisattva. Dikson.
다 고바 도와 매바다 동에 주 고타이반 선나 샴바던 희제야 네 희제야 신도 마버젤라사 자니 바마 손버들 도와 매바다 동에 주 고타이바 자체부산 담바이나 고타이반 선나 샴바던 희제야 신도 마버젤라스 샤바드 해지 뭐지 용레스 ane jure san tamba ina jure ma sana shu tralas jure sam tamba ina hinji shu trabu yungures shu trala hinji tembu yungures shu trala temba jeyu danga jungje re tsine rong chewa la sheba na gomba dona to shin du chung sa danga jungje re ngokuene bacha chuchun jil ngokuene rong chebun shejabe hinji gombi chutu san matana hinji to chuchun jil jig mares rong chewan to san tambaina an hinji jachewa tin soba yungures tsine rong chewan na sheba na gomba to na to shin du chungos odu goba deredwa.
Lesso. So number 9. If you reflect from limitless viewpoints on how beings lack happiness and have suffering, you would develop much love and compassion. Moreover, if you think about this for a long time, your love and compassion will be strong and steady. Therefore, if you are satisfied with just a little personal instruction and neglect to familiarize yourself with the explanations of the classical text, your compassion and love will be very weak. So this is number 9.
What that Hiji Chabadala good thunder.
So this completes the 9 categories of great compassion.
Tanyeba the Sanjay than Hijila Tubajubas. Niba Sanjay than Hijil Tubajubatele, what then Monday would one Hijida, Sanjil Tubajubatela, Jijan.
So now we move on to the section of doubts arising about the differences of bodhicitta and compassion. And there are 4 categories in this section.
Hijida Sanjila, Tubajubala, Gunsu, Mishe Kutu, Gusu Tambuji, Tanyuan Tentuji.
Tambo donagare. Sena? Tambo sena?
That then what the Hinja the Sanjil, Hinja the Sanjil Tobajo, Hinja the Sanjil Tobajobala, Mishi, Kutu Gusus, Mission, Sergeant, Sebujin, Pelujon Jewures, Sebujin, the Abujin, Manana, and New Homares, Tombadin Zare. Mishi Kutu Gubatans, Tambuji,
Clarity.
Yuan Tentunji, Machubas, Yuan Tentun, Yuan Chuchun, and Abbot two Mares.
Nyowa? Lobjong?
Yuan and that, Hijaguna, Hijachamajun, Yuan Chamberota. And then Hijachimaju, Yuan Chun, Kalikale, Chichin Rule.
Nyowa dopa?
Yuan and the Kulu, Yanu, Tubal Yanu, Yuan.
Okay, realize. Okay.
What did Yuan Tentuji, Machuba, Tanibaje? Then he did down, Shambi Jesse dance, his Julaji Sekare, Shamba Julaji Sekare, Nanu Samba Juju, the Kangatama Chikanga Dabro, his Julaji Se, Shamba Julaji said shows.
Okay.
In fact, good to Tabatanian Shona, the Se, Nanu Jebala said, then double in Jerota, his Julaji Se, Shamba Julaji Se. Then the Sanjit. They Sanjin Drambi, Jitsit Tombas, Shamba Julaji said, and his Julaji said the Abung answer sooner, tell a dinner, and then Sanji Julaji said the Abung Uruta.
Okay.
What the Saji Jidi, Jaji Wood, the Saji Jidine, what so do.
Okay, so category number 2, doubts about the differences of compassion and bodhicitta. So the first category is the need for clarity. So one needs to clearly understand this. So it's just the need for clarity is category number 1. Category 2 is something about the nipa. The Yanju Suriname Gonga Mepichi.
Yuan Tentuji, but Yuan Chun, the Yabu Maris. Yuan Chungo, Ding, Chamber Yorota. He's a Julji in Yuan Chamber. He's a magic one tombo, he's in Dabu Chuchun Yunguro, and then Ding, then he's Chamber Yunguro. What the Yuan Tentus in Yuan Chuchun than the
So, the second is there are levels of realization, almost something like this. So there are levels of realization. Number 3, the causes of compassion. Rinpoche said similar to what we went over before. Causes of compassion. What does compassion come from? What comes from compassion? This sort of discussion. And number 4.
Can't
read my writing. Senche.
They Sanjin Dambis, Rawa. Shamba the shamba dan ni jibi tse de abang ngasa
Less
sona.
so.
De senji jibi tse de den rabo shetu res.
So if you utilize these steps to generate, so number 4 is if you've utilized these steps in order to generate compassion and love and so forth, then you will easily be able to do so in the same way with bodhicitta. You will be able to realize bodhicitta in the same way. Disa.
Da jiba do ku wode niba de lari chimbe jena wode de do wode lari chimbe jena de ya ha shiba dares. De ya ha shiba do de niba de le yongare. De ya ha shiba kusul den wo de inja anga.
De yang
ha shiba dares. Wode ma senji de nijil do ju do ba den de ju yongare da. Senji da nijil do ba yogoro. 도바 된 도바 좀 어디서 야집에 대 도바 좀 누구 아
순자둔
송자둔 올에 송제가들로
5 대양ar
셰바 따라 대제지 요고스
okay
어떤 마 대제 산제다 희질 도바 좀 어디
Okay, so we're on page 45, just this where we left off, basically. Moreover, after you have thoroughly distinguished the objects of meditation according to the previous explanations, how compassion is the root, etc. So that's where we're going to begin. The main heading is the differences, doubts about the differences of bodhicitta and great compassion. And this is such a tumble.
What the jignan tambuter da jignan tambuter.
Kabar kagdu?
They are.
Okay.
Ha sheba der teje jogo senju yin lu da heje de zawan lu su lu la su ba min ji min le ba shine su su tu bi shira ji je jin jang be 타제비 뇽아 괴제스 어디봐도 제난 담부들 어디술 내가 도바 저르면서 도바죠 야지로 어디 저르면서 도바죠 도송래 그 도바래도 아 대형 하시바 따르 대전 요구스 때마르베 세지반의 제든시 야다 두비 상주도 모두진 세지반의 제든시 야다 두비 상주도 해야 되게 대전 요구 세지된 바 인송을 세지반의 제든시 야다 두비 상주도 모두진 저 상방공배 어디 대전 요구 세지된 거를 때 세지의 대전 대바침을 요구를 현지의 대바침을 자와를 어떻게 되니 내려도 도스다 대전 세지 대전을 요구 현지 전부 대전을 자와 어디 그데 젊은데 송도 도스다 냐지베 될 도바줘도 왔다
Okay, so the first clarity is the first category among this. Moreover, after you have thoroughly distinguished the objects of meditation according to the previous explanations, how compassion is the root, how the development of the spirit of enlightenment is the entrance to the Mahayana, and so forth, you must then analyze these explanations with discerning wisdom and elicit the experience produced after sustaining them in meditation.
다 대전 세제 대전란 요구를 요구임이 주선 가르스나 대전 세제의 대전란 요구임이 주선 가르스나 대전 산제의 줄 제바단 랑상 안에 강자의 상주 선바차는 그래스 대전 세제 냐송나 되는 돈이 되비 싫어라 수비에 가지 연나야 팬투고 말에 네트 살사는 그래스 근데 담아지는 송송아 대전 세제 대전란 요구를 주선 가르스나 대전 세제의 줄 제바단 랑상 대바 점비 주는 그래스 대전 세제의 냐송나 돈이 되비 싫어다 주투던 것이 가지고 봐이나야 팬투고 말에 테면서 안 그래스 대인소는 대전 세제 대전 요구임이 주센터레스
So great compassion is the root of the Mahayana. The only entrance to the Mahayana is the mind that aspires to enlightenment, bodhicitta. So we find in I forgot this from before, in the Abhisama Alamkara, this point made that the entrance to the great vehicle is the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And we can see in the importance of it. Hold on one sec. The importance of it, because it doesn't matter how many realizations of emptiness one has had or how many magical powers one has achieved. If he or she is a bodhisattva and then loses his or her bodhicitta, they will fall, he or she will fall to the Hinayana vehicle. So we can say that this bodhicitta is the only entrance into the Mahayana, because once one becomes a bodhisattva, one is a Mahayanist. But if one loses that bodhicitta, if that bodhisattva loses his or her bodhicitta, then no matter what other realizations they've had, they become Hinayanists. Either here or solitary realizer vehicle Hinayanist. So the qualifying feature is that mind that aspires to enlightenment. If the being has that, then he or she is a great vehicle practitioner. If not, then he or she is not. So that's the clear line of demarcation between Mahayana and not Mahayana, is the mind that aspires to enlightenment. So that's the point that's made here. Let me make sure I got all of it. Digso.
다 니지 전부도 텐전 산지 텐전 란주고 이미 주세 되지. 다 니지 전부도 대바 전부 란지 자와 이미 주세 가르스나 니지 전부 대바 전부 란지 자와레스 마시 텐텐수 대 주레스 네 하산다 산지니 대 레버스 다마 송사 송아. 어때야 저거를 저 레드 말বে.
So then the reason that we say that the great compassion is the root of the Mahayana is because we see that all of the realizations previously presented are either causes for great compassion or results of great compassion. So recognizing sentient beings are our mother, remembering their kindness, wishing to repay their kindness, love through the force of attraction, all of these become causes for great compassion, and the extraordinary attitude, wholehearted resolve, and the actual bodhicitta itself become results of great compassion. So here we just once again are asked to look at these topics which require us to think about them over and over. Rinpoche uses the word for circling, kora jap. The same exact, just as a translator's note, the same exact word that he would use to mean going around a stupa, circumambulating a stupa, is how he explains looking at this material. He says circling it again and again, circling it. So I always think it's strange to translate it, we'll circle this material, but that's what Rinpoche is literally saying, meaning that we'll circle it again, going around it again. So that's the point here, that we then are encouraged to look at those topics, to circle them again.
다 대제 선제 대제란 주고 임바다 현재 대바 진발 한지 자와 임바들 부드센 산탄소 부드센 대주센 산탄고르스.
So the reasons for these fall into the category of Buddhist signs and reason. So why is it the root of the Mahayana? Why is it the bodhicitta, the entrance to the Mahayana? So these are all. So the way we think about these topics is the same way that a scientist would think about their work. This gentleman's a scientist.
Yeah. Yeah. What the Buddha saying?
So this is I thought he was Rinpoche maybe is saying Buddhist science. This is like Buddhist science. There's also Buddhist signs and reasoning that this is, but I think in this case Rinpoche is saying this is like Buddhist science. He's using English, so.
Senji lo dang song du wo de Buddhist san dang song go de yin lo dang ji ji zawan ru lu su ji ji tiba chen bi lang ji zawan yin bi ju sen 주선 산당 워레스 룰로 수지 미 레바라 쳔네 서서진 산에 아부당 워레스 소소도 비셔러지 네 셔러지 네 셔러 제바시 워레스 제바 마르바 안에 셔러데 셔러로 제비 네바데 셔러로 여드로 셔러 마르바 네바 메바 잠바 띵은지 셔러 유응가 마르바 유응가에 너는 어디 수수도 셔러들 제바시야 네바 여드로보다 네바 셔러가 제바시고 그래서 제바시비 주들라 땅달라 되는 제바시 주당 네 땅달라 마대 제바시 주 뭐부여로 어디서 산동송의 인사를.
So it says you must then analyze these explanations with discerning wisdom and elicit the experience produced after sustaining them in meditation. So it requires analysis. So one should analyze these points over and over by the use of correct signs and reasoning. It says with discerning wisdom. So utilize one's ability to analyze and increase one's understanding through analysis and the use of correct signs over and over again to the point where there's an actual realization. So the point of this is to just repeatedly analyze these things in order to experience them. And it says that's the only way that they will actually be experienced is through this familiarization over and over again. Dixon.
어떤 현재 또한 룰루 수지 미레바시네 수수도 비셔지 제진 수수도 비셔 제바시네 땅달을 제바 땅달을 땐 제바시 주다 대마이 제바시 주거든 뭐 산당 그래스 제진 장비 ane 타제비 요아고지스 니점도 어데 된다게 대바점이 대전 세지 대전란 주고 임바다 진짜 자와 임바다 수가 땅달을 때네 근데 아부시네 근데 요아지바지 고그레스 고지스 네 요아고지스 어디바들레 담보들 담보.
You will not achieve anything with the unclear experiences that come when you make a short, concentrated effort without precisely clarifying the topic with your understanding. Know that this is true for other kinds of practice as well. So one needs to go over this over and over and utilize correct signs and reasoning in order to realize this. It's not something that can be realized quite easily. It's something that requires analysis and effort.
어디 영화 제가 고지 어디 담보지 니바들 니바드네 어디 니바 그 레벨 미 마시바 포수를라 베베 영화 탄통지 가야 메시데 냐네 지가 현도야 되다 셔바셔오스 어디 니바들에도와 다 대진 선지대 대진랑 조고이나 예비 주세 현지 자와인 예비 주세 어디서 그걸 사서진 제바시네 야부지 셔바지는 공고레스 공네 내 샤주고 세다 현지 줄 제바지 고고레스 대마인 바지 고아미 마셔바 포수를라 베베 네 탐통지 네 간 루투 마레스 냐래지 내제도 대다 셔바샤오스 현지 세그 말했다 샤바든 현지 돈이도 비셔러다 몸 냐래 강갈 현다 강갈 자고 그래스 그레바미 마시바 포수를라 베베 뇨아 탐통지 가야 마신데 냐래지 나 냐래지 거 현도 대다 셔바샤오스 what did Nibatre?
Kabargutso, Nipa Kabargutso.
Good dinner and good dinner in the Gui Lebashos, Goa.
Goa Lepar, okay. Goa Lepar.
Shaju sent Tenzin Lan Juguin Balagoa Chagures, Tenji Tenzin Zawa in Balagoa, Goya Chagures, Gui Leba Mish, Mashiba, Kualaba Machapa Posuso, and Tagas San Tanshabe. 뇽아 탄두지 간 용어 말이스.
Okay.
미신데
So,
냐는지 거 전도 왔다 셔바샤우스. 현재든 생질 송바디 젠달을 크고레스.
okay.
다부산당 고레스.
So this needs to be split too now. So the first category ends at how this is broken down into 4 categories. So the first category actually splits here. Hold on one second. Moreover, after you have thoroughly distinguished the objects of meditation according to the previous explanations, how compassion is the root, how the development of the spirit of enlightenment is the entrance to the Mahayana, and so forth, you must then analyze these explanations with discerning wisdom and elicit the experience produced after sustaining them in meditation. So recognizing that compassion is the root of the Mahayana and why. The only entrance to the Mahayana is bodhicitta. Why is that? What's the reason for that? So analyzing these over and over again. And then number 2, so that's point number 1. Number 2 is that you will not achieve anything with the unclear experiences that come when you make a short concerted effort without precisely clarifying the topic with your understanding. Know that this is true for other kinds of practice as well. So that's the second point that's made within the 4.
다 제바들 데르도 송바로와. 송바들 와데
That's it. Okay, Dutsu.
송바데 니지 줄라 집이 세데르도와. 니지 집이 줄라 집이 세가르스나.
Lessa.
고네 담불이 송도 까말라 실라.
Lessa.
고네 담불이 송도스. 니지 줄라 집이 세네. 고네 담불에 강기 세 예동원유 네 범도와 진도 sentient da na lam dungen ten ne shangwan de bi na bi ni je rang ki nga gen jo ba da ni je chomba jo de che te zo ba yin be ni ji chenbo me to de chebu chung chebu bu chung da ni je bu chung da 버총은 해도 치 도바 동해와 줘발라 마데 제자지 네 저와 대장비로 최장지 신전 단지라 신전하기 나기 제반나 신전 준비 전이 창왕 송소스 더 권 니지 좀 줄라 집이 세도 권에 담불 더 송도 돼. 네, 강하게 예동원유다. 아마질 보고 추중 줘봐 이나. 아마질 보고 추중 줘봐 이나 보 추중 줘봐 이나 예동원유 보 추중 돼. 동해 요나 뭐도와 이나 뭐도와 진도스 아마도 보고 추중 나도 요나 네 아마도 와데 들 희지 지금 말বে एक दिन बजाते एक दिन वो ये दोनों वो मदवा जिन तो सेजन थाजे लां दोगे तेन ने शावा देवी नाबी हिजे रागे जोबा दानी जे सोबा जोबा जो तीसे जोबा यिबे हिजे चेंबु मेथोदेस बचोंग 해도 체도바 등한 줘봤대 마디 네 해지 땅 저와 저장비로 최지 세전 단지라 해지랑게 나게 저와나 해지 준비 천이 청왕 송소 네 샤마 쳔버집이 세전 리버샤우스 단 해지 쳔버 줄라 집이 세대 아버셔서 소나 샤마 줄라 집이 세대야 달라드네 셰도 그래스 다 어디 그때서 레모 도와도 다 근데 아마질 보고 주준 줘봐 이나 보고 주준 줘봐 이나 보고도 동해 요나 아마도 어디 보고들 해지 말배 드나지 자니 바마 참말에 네 아마도 보고 저 니지 나지 example 자니 바마 송로 어들 집어 이나 아니 해지 좀 용거레스 example 자데 있어래
So number 3, we have a quote from Kamalashila's Stages of Meditation. It says, it gives the measure for the development of compassion. When you spontaneously feel compassion, which has the subjective wish to completely eliminate the suffering of all living beings, just like a mother's wish to remove her dear child's unhappiness, when your compassion is complete and is therefore called great compassion. Here, Kamalashila says that when you spontaneously feel compassion for all beings, commensurate with a mother's compassion for her very dear and small suffering child, then you have completely perfect great compassion. Through this, understand the measure for the development of great love as well. So you can use this example to understand what great love means. When the compassion is wishing to remove the suffering and love bring happiness. So we can use the same sort of understandings and apply it to these other topics. And so when a small child has some sort of suffering, the mother wishes to remove that suffering from the small child. When that same wish spontaneously happens for all sentient beings, then one has great compassion. So if that same wish that the mother has to remove the suffering of her child spontaneously occurs within you, and you are only thinking about all sentient beings without leaving any out whatsoever, then the arisal of great compassion has taken place. And that's a karma kasha yuri. Okay, so we're going to end there because Rinpoche said that this section goes on and is quite long. So we will end there and we'll come back to it next week. In the meantime, if I can, I don't want to promise, but if I can, I'll try and sort out this section to see how it can be properly, I don't know. I'll have to look at it. So thank you all for your patience, and I apologize for the choppiness of the translation. It happens very seldomly, but whenever you run into a section that you can't just read from and use, then it becomes a what do we do now part. So thank you for your patience. Okay, we'll turn to the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drakpa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. Whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, holder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, the spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts, with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Suji Rinpoche Kutsi Shapi Terona. Lamrim Chenmo Kanga Chirona.
Oh, yeah.